it's been a special kind of week. Obviously, we had the game at Rickwood Field last night. It was preceded by the death of Willie Mays, a legend around here, a legend throughout baseball. And it has been rewarding and informative to talk to so many people who had their opportunity to share the history of baseball and the history of Willie Mays. And we're going to do it again momentarily with LaTroy Hawkins. But yeah, it's just been a different kind of week. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's been a reflective week. It's been an educative week. It's been an enlightening week. It's also been an entertaining week. There's been a lot of things that we have learned and will continue to learn. And I feel like ideally this is a starting point. This is a jumping off point for a lot of people that either didn't know anything about what happened at Rickwood Field and what preceded it, but also people that did learn a lot. Like I think I've been able to kind of dive into this maybe a little more than most, but I learned a lot last night, and it was really valuable.
Well, let's bring in LaTroy Hawkins. He was there last night in Birmingham, former Major League pitcher, pitched for the Giants, among other teams. LaTroy, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, fellas. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let me just start with, how did you get involved in the Rickwood Field game last night, and why did you want to be a part of it?
So I'm actually a part of the CAP program, which is the Commissioner's Ambassador Program for Major League Baseball. And, we it's through Rob Manfred, the commissioner, and we get to go to different events throughout the year to represent Major League Baseball. So that's how I was actually there, participating in all the Rickwood festivities.
Gotcha. And what tell me about last night. I mean, what did it mean to you to be there and to experience it?
It meant the world, just simply because, all the guys that, my grandfather always told me about, they all played at that stadium, Rickwood. And when you walk through there, you get this feeling like you're walking on a field that's, people that look like you play on. And, it just gives me goosebumps just talking about it, because what Major League Baseball was able to do and the way they turned that field into a great playing surface for those two Major League teams to play on, it was simply amazing. And the people in Birmingham, I told my friend from Birmingham, I said, your city showed up and they showed out.
Well, and of course, LaTroy, the biggest member from Birmingham and the baseball community, passed away a couple days ago in Willie Mays. And you mentioned your grandfather. I was listening earlier this week and have heard some stories about how you yourself have a Willie Mays story, and it involves your grandfather. Would you mind sharing that with our audience?
Yeah, when I got traded over to San Francisco in 2005, Willie was my grandfather's favorite player, man. His favorite player. Even he loved him more than he loved me. And, while I was there, Willie would be in the clubhouse with Uncle Murph in his office and just hanging out. And I would go in there and talk to him because, you know what? He reminded me of my grandfather, because he can sit in a chair, and before long, everybody in the room would be sitting around him or standing around him listening to him tell stories. And him and I were talking one day. I was like, man, you're my grandfather's favorite player. And he's like, get your grandfather on the phone. So I got my grandfather on the phone, and he and my grandfather talked for about 15 minutes. And, on the other time I saw my grandfather heard him, that excitement in his voice was when I had him on the phone with B.B. King. So Willie Mays and B.B. King was my grandfather's favorite.
That's awesome. That's awesome. LaTroy Hawkins joining us on 95.7 The Game. He was at the Rickwood Field game last night in Birmingham. Because we've heard a lot of stories similar to that about Willie Mays. And look, I'm looking at your career, and you played 20 years. Essentially, and you played for a lot of teams, and you were only with the Giants for 1 year. And what's striking me, LaTroy, is you were just there for 1 year and apparently developed a relationship with Willie Mays. I mean, is that accurate?
That's indicative of Willie, because every ball player that he came in contact with, he made you feel like he was your uncle, your grandfather. Like, he had that personality. It was just like, that's what they did back in the day. Like, they didn't have places where they can go. They had to go into the black neighborhoods and actually hang out with their people. They couldn't go mingle with the white people.
Right.
They couldn't. So they were always at somebody's house or at the local juke joint having a good time in their own space. And Willie always brought that with him. And you can get countless stories, and he just didn't do it with all the black players. Jake Peavy has a great story of sitting down with Willie and his grandfather, and him Willie inviting him to his house. So Willie was just a larger-than-life icon for, in the baseball world.
Well, and a lot of these stories, LaTroy, I feel like are bringing people into this space, and I hope people are able to stay there and continue to educate themselves. But I'm curious, as somebody that has just a wealth of knowledge and intimate knowledge about this event, its connections, obviously Willie Mays, was there anything that you learned through this experience that you didn't know before?
Not really. I'm huge into the Negro Leagues. I've always had a chance to spend a whole lot of time with Buck O'Neil and Bob Kendrick. I've always gone to the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City. If you hadn't been there, you should go. You should take your family. But one of those things, like, people still don't understand, like, how cruel our country was, and in some aspects still is. And I think if people really understood that, and I love what Reggie Jackson did last night on the show on Fox. He kept it raw and uncut, because guess what? Reggie experienced that. He experienced people trying to kill him just because of the color of his skin. And I thought America needed to hear that, and they did. And I'm glad nothing got beeped out in his interview, because it's still there. It's still there. It comes in different forms, but it's still there. And people need to know that.
Yeah, LaTroy, we're talking to LaTroy Hawkins, former Major League pitcher. Well, I mean, I grew up, Reggie was my guy when I was about 10, 12 years old. And obviously when I heard the story last night, it resonated. But I do wonder, like, when you hear that as an African-American, what you're saying is you don't even hear former black athletes or Negro League players saying things like that, so it touched you.
Yeah, it touched me because my grandfather was 6 years older than Willie Mays. So my grandfather grew up in Mississippi, and he left Mississippi at 16 years old. He changed his birth certificate to be 18 years old so he can go into the military, so he can get out of the South. So my grandfather passed away in 2020 at 94 years old. So I've heard all the stories. Maybe not from a professional baseball player's aspect, but from my grandfather's perspective. And he said the best thing he ever did was left the South. The best thing he ever did was left the South, because people were so cruel. And I don't understand how you can be cruel to somebody because of the color of their skin. And you know why I don't understand? Because I'm not that way. I love people for who they are. I love people because of their heart. I don't love people because of the color of their skin.
Oh, I appreciate that, LaTroy. And just to kind of follow up on it, just thinking about last night, it does make also the stories about, for example, the kindness of Willie Mays and the heart that he had. It makes it all the more impressive because of what you're talking about. I'm curious, have you yourself experienced, and maybe not to that level that Reggie Jackson was speaking about last night pregame on Fox, but you mentioned the things that kind of still happen today. I mean, did you have to deal with any of that coming up, or do you feel like the fact that they were able to pave the way erase some of those experiences?
They did erase some of those experiences because of what they had to endure just to exist back then. But like I said, there are things now that people do that they're still, racist. Right. Mm-hmm. It's still there. It's still there. It's not completely eradicated. And until our Caucasian brothers and sisters start calling out their own for being racist, I don't understand. It'll never go away. It's not just enough for me to call it out or Reggie to call it out. Our Caucasian brothers and sisters are going to have to be some allies for us, and they're going to have to call out their family members.
LaTroy, let me ask you this real quick, since you were, and I appreciate that also. Are there any, do you know of any, this was such a great event last night. Are there any plans maybe to do this every year, or maybe even to play a series in Birmingham every year? Because, I understand that they turned the entire area around the stadium into just a great gathering place.
It was a big party, and a lot of people said that it reminded them when back in the day when the Negro Leagues used to play their games, how it was a big event. And I'm not sure if it will be played next year. Hadn't heard anything about it, but I really don't think we should be one and done in that community. That community needed what MLB brought, that product, And hopefully it's something that we continue to do because, again, Birmingham needed that.
Well, and LaTroy, as someone who was there from the beginning and the buildup of the event to the end, it might be difficult to whittle it down, but did you have a favorite part? Did you have a favorite moment or conversation from getting to, I don't know, just dive head first into everything that we've been talking about and everything that honestly was brought to light and brought back to life by Rickwood Field?
And they had so many men who played in the Negro Leagues there, and just being able to sit, and chat and introduce myself to those guys because I know they're part of the group that built a bridge that myself, CC Sabathia, Chris Young, Michael Bourne, Albert Pujols, Dexter Fowler, we all get to cross that bridge because of what those men had to endure and what they had to go through. Just having conversations with the guys who actually experienced it and played at Rickwood.
LaTroy, let me finish up by asking you this. Obviously, there was unbelievable festivities outside of the stadium. Was it a diverse crowd that was there? Was it primarily black? Was it all different colors? No. I mean, who all heard this message?
It was all colors that was there. It was, again, Birmingham showed up and they showed out. Everybody showed up. Everybody came out to support what MLB did in Birmingham. Everybody came and supported. It was, and then you had so many people from San Francisco. You had people from St. Louis. San Francisco definitely showed up also. But it was a great experience, and hopefully we can do it again next year and many years to come.
LaTroy, thank you so much for joining us. That is great insight. I'm glad you were a part of it last night because it sounds like it was really, really special. Thanks for sharing.
All right. Thanks for having me, fellas.
All right. That's LaTroy Hawkins. He's part of the Commissioner's Ambassador program. It's called CAP, and he was a part of last night's game and festivities at Birmingham. And another impressive guest that we talked to